Because remember, we're in our theological debate. If you're new to this series, theological debate is a fancy way of saying thinking about the existence of God. Why does God exist? What is the purpose of life is what we talked about last week. What is the meaning of life? Why do we get up in the morning? Why do we live? We talked about that. If you didn't get to see it, go back on YouTube on the Torch page, and we'll be able to explain it to you. So each week we're going to be diving into a theological question that's going to break off into 1,000 different directions, guaranteed, because that's what when you have to use your noodle and have to really, really press in and think about things for yourself, not just hearing what Pastor Scott says, but actually think about them on your own. It breaks off into 1,000 different questions, and that's good, because each one should be answered by you. Because, the reason for this, the reason God put this on my heart, and I truly believe it, the reason this is important, why should I care about this? Here's why. Because when Shiloh says he has faith, and he shares his faith, and somebody says, I don't believe that, Shiloh. Why do you think Jesus is real? Some of you would go, because the Bible said so? Well, why is the Bible real? Because my mom said so? I don't know. All of a sudden, you're caught with your pants down. You can't defend yourself. You have no reason other than, I was told to believe this. That's not faith. That's not true belief. That's obedience, which is halfway there. But please do not believe in God just based on somebody in your life who told you to. That's not an authentic relationship with Jesus. It's you going off the word of somebody else. I want you to understand and experience and think about these things for yourself. That's why this whole series is important. So tonight, the one thing that we need to be thinking about is I loved having theological debates. I used to work with an atheist, a true atheist. We talked about the difference between atheist and agnostic on Sunday morning. But I used to work with a true atheist when I washed dishes at a restaurant. And me and him, I love this man to death. He was a great guy. We both respected each other so much that we could have debates, that we could have conversations. Never once did it get heated. Never once was I screaming at him and was he screaming at me. Never. He was one of the nicest guys I ever met, and he always was just so interested. Why do you think the way you think? And I was always so interested. How can you think the way you think? Let's talk about it. And we had so many amazing discussions. And the number one question in all of my theological debates with people and theological talks with people's believers or not is this question right here. Why would a loving God let bad things happen to good people? Well, if that isn't a tough question to answer, I don't know what is. A bad thing such as a natural disaster, a bad thing as cancer, a bad thing as something unexplainable. Why? I mean, we don't know what causes cancer. We don't know why it forms in some and not others. We don't know even really how to get rid of it. We don't know much about it. And so to say that I know everything is ludicrous. Don't ever say we know the answer to this question, because that would mean you're who? God. And that's a very risky game if you want to play that one. If you want to say you're God, you're going to have to deal with God, and good luck with that. When asked theological questions from other people, such as this one, first thing, as a believer, first thing is defending your faith, you need to do, dissect the question and understand exactly, and usually, take Jesus' advice, ask a question to make sure you're understanding what they're asking you clearly, because there's a problem with this question. Do you know what it is? Hannah? Good people. We talked about this last week. No one's good except God. So this question is wrong. See, people will phrase a question to trap you. It can happen. Not all people. Not all atheists are bad. Like I said, my friend, good dude. I liked him. But there is no good people. So let's rephrase the question. Why would a loving God allow bad things to happen to people? Still a good question. Still a very difficult question to answer. You'll hear people also, by the way, just so you know, instead of allow things. Why would a loving God do things to bad people? That would be wrong, because not all bad things are done by God. We'll talk about that tonight. But anyway, I digress. So, problem with this theology is this is the gotcha theology all over again, where God's a meanie and he's the God in the floating clouds on his throne is looking down on us, and he has a magnifying glass, and I'm an ant and he's just a bad dude being mean to poor old me. I've done nothing wrong. I'm perfect. Humans are great and God's bad. That's exactly what this question sets up. Why would somebody who claims to be love, who claims to care about us so much, do bad things, or even let bad things happen to you? We're going to talk about that tonight. So if something uncomfortable happens, or something that is quote-unquote bad, I believe it boils down to three things, and I've labeled them here. The possibilities for trouble is what I'm calling them. It is the three reasons that I believe, if you boil everything down to this question, I believe it falls under three categories, but it's not limited to. I will concede there's probably more reasons for smaller things, but majority could fit under these three categories as to possibilities for trouble is what I'm calling them. And so the first is absolutely 100% biblically and personally true I have seen in my life, which is that God is teaching you through difficult and uncomfortable means. See, bad things happen either to people who believe and not believe, and everybody in between. There's nobody subject to pain, trouble, and trials. Jesus himself went through trials. So my question is, why? That's what we're asking. Because he teaches us in the valleys. I don't know about your lives, but where I grew the most in my faith as a person, the best time I ever made changes in my life that were for better, not for worse, was not in the happiest moments where I just accomplished being a pastor or I just graduated high school and I was on cloud nine. No, it's not the good moments in my life that I grew the most. It was the valleys. It was the hardship. It was the journey through dyslexia that had many, many tears with it. Grew me so much. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you guys know them as, many of you know the story of the fiery furnace. See, sometimes God will deliver you from the furnace in your life. Other times, he'll simply make you fireproof and let it burn on. See, that's the God I serve. See, we get pain, all sorts of mixed up. Pain cannot overcome you. Pain does not define you. Pain is uncomfortable, but necessary. Without pain, you will never learn. When you're 3 years old or 7 or even 16 for some of you, and you see the red hot stove, and you think, well, that looks beautiful, I should touch that. Why haven't you touched it again? Because you learned the first time it burnt my hands. I got no fingerprints left because of what happened. I learned a lesson that I will carry with me the rest of my life. When something's red hot, I know, don't touch it. That pain was necessary for you to learn a lesson that you will carry with you the rest of your lives. There is persecution that will take place in your life as a Christian that will resonate and be with you for the rest of your life, but it's a good thing to know that I can still share my faith. I can come out of this furnace stronger and closer with God. An example of this is Ruth. Ruth was an amazing woman of God. She went through an incredible, incredible difficult season, and she even made a choice that was going to make her life immensely more difficult. She chose to stay with her mother-in-law. Wasn't even her real mother. She chose to stay with her, knowing that life was going to get rough. She was going to go through a deep, deep valley. And she did. But what happened? That song we were singing, God, you are so faithful. Did God abandon her? No. He clung to her. He stuck with her. He taught her. And Ruth came out the other side, praising God, closer in her faith than ever before. See, there is, and honestly, I could list 1,000 examples from the Bible of men and women. Just look at Joseph's life. He has literally like 50 of his own tragedies that brought him closer to God rather than pulling him apart. See, it's all about your heart. Are you willing to learn in the valley, or are you going to sit down and be like everybody in this world? Well, I'm offended and I'm upset and everybody's being so mean. Okay, yeah. I don't know where you got this idea that people are nice. I honestly, my wife can be ruthless to me. She's so mean. The other day she was making fun of me, and I was like, "You're mean." And she started laughing. She's like, "Yeah, but you're my husband. You have to love me." See, bait and switch. She did it. No, I'm kidding. It's true though. We want to sit down. We want to have a pity party and be like, "Well, woe is me." Okay, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to grow. You're going to stay in this valley a long time before you learn and come out of it. Because in order to come out of the valleys, you have to learn why you were in there in the first place, take ownership of the part that you have in it, learn the lesson, and then God brings you out. If Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego sat in that furnace crying about how the king's mean and Nebuchadnezzar is just a jerk and he offended me and I'm so hurt, there would only be 3 walking around in there. There would be no 4th. But when they prayed to God, when they said, "God, what are you doing? I don't understand, but you know what? We believe you're God." Then there was a 4th in the furnace, and they were brought out. They grew closer. Everything God had prepared for them took place because they were willing to learn through pain and hardship. Sometimes the troubles in your life will teach you the most, and you will be thankful for them later in life. I look back on a lot of very messed up things that happened to me. So thankful because it just made me know God that much more. It made me understand his stance on whatever happened. See, God teaches us in the uncomfortable moments. A second thing I believe is true, the one we don't like, is God is testing you. This is not a fun one. Well, I don't believe that there's anybody in here who hates this one more than me. I don't like tests. I don't like you requiring that I can prove that I know something. But there are things that require proof. For instance, let me give you an example, help you understand this. I tell Nate, I love you, and you can trust me, right? It doesn't mean anything, really. I mean, it's nice. It sounds good, right? It gives you warm, fuzzy feelings. I love Pastor Scott. I can trust him. When does it become true? It becomes true when he tells me something that needs to be kept in confidence. It becomes true when you put your life in my hands. When we go to winter retreat, you get in the car with me, you put your life in my hands because I trust you, Scott. You said I could trust you. Now what has to happen? I have to perform in a way that's trustworthy. I have to show up and prove to you that, in fact, you can trust me. Otherwise, it's just words. Some of you trusted wrong people in your life, and you're like, well, yeah, they said I could trust them, but I can't because they misused the information you gave them and stabbed you in the back. See, God is the same way. To just have faith is not enough. To just be a hard worker is not enough. You need faith and works. They go hand in hand. They cannot be separated. So you have to trust in God and back it up with your actions. Example of this is Abraham and Isaac. Abraham was asked by God to sacrifice his son. Now, speaking as a parent, that makes absolutely zero sense. Speaking as a pastor who knows the heart of God a little bit, some would say more than most, that makes no sense. So I don't understand what God was doing other than, I want to see if he's going to do it. I want to see if he will trust me over what he thinks is right. We'd all sit here and go, yeah, that's a bad idea. That's not good. That's not biblical. That's not right. Everybody in here would be like, I have a problem with that. Okay, great. You have a problem. Now I want to see if you're willing to set your thoughts, your heart, your problems aside and come after what I'm telling you to do. And God bless Abraham. He didn't hesitate one bit. He said, sure, God, let's go. Isaac, get in the car. We're leaving. It's exactly what happened. And God was so blessed. He was so happy with Abraham because he put his money where his mouth was. When the test came down the pipeline, he performed admirably. Look at Job. Job was offered up by God. Everybody knows the story how Job went bankrupt and all those bad things happened by the devil's hand. Did you know it was God himself who said, hey, what about Job? I mean, I love you, God, but don't ever say that about me. Please, don't test me like that. He said, yeah, you want somebody to hurt? You think all these people just love me because I'm awesome and I've been so cushy to them? Well, fine, here, take Job. Do anything you want. You just can't take his life. He offered him up for a test. Why? Because he knew that test would produce stronger faith. He knew that test would not just teach Job, but he would use this scenario to teach millions. Still teaching me through that. Praise the Lord. Do you see how the testing of your faith is necessary to even know you got faith? The problem in the first world that we live in is, do you really have the kind of faith it takes to give your life for it? See, many of you will never have to know the answer to that question because we live in America. It's not allowed to punch somebody, let alone threaten somebody for their beliefs. See, I like to think I would, but how would you know until the opportunity came down the pipeline? Until I was put to the test, you wouldn't know if it's true or not. See, some of you are already faltering because God told you to share your faith. Yet when the time comes and the opportunity comes with the kids at school, on the bus, home from the soccer game, you chose not to. There's your test. And it shows you not, oh, I'm a horrible person and I don't believe in Jesus and I should just quit trying. No, it shows you your faith is weak. You need growing. You need to get closer to the heart of God. You need to understand him better. You need to spend more time on the theological questions and trying to get to know the heart of Jesus and understand how much you need him. Do you see how the testing of your faith can be one of the greatest tools God uses to get you closer to him, to show you where you need to grow, what needs to increase and what needs to decrease? And now the difficult one, the third one, the one nobody likes, and the one this world will probably cancel me. I don't know if they can try to, at least, for even saying, is that there are consequences for your actions, and there are consequences that I will experience for the actions of others. Oof. Nobody likes this one. See, this one bothers me. Actions and consequences are inseparable. For every action, there is a consequence. Now, some consequences are good, some are bad, but there is a consequence to every action. It's inseparable for humans. There is so many different examples of this, but my favorite is Jesus. See, because of Jesus' belief in God, he unfortunately suffered the consequences of others. Because of my sin, because of my choices, the consequence that was put on Jesus was to go to the cross, to be crucified, killed by the very people he came to save, go to hell, and die. That was his consequence because of my actions, and he accepted those consequences. But because he was also fully man or fully God, and lived a perfect life, lived in a just way that pleased God, his consequence for those actions was heaven. So he conquered death, conquered the grave, rose, and now sits at the right hand of the Father in heaven above, watching us tonight. See, both actions of mine and his own, both consequences good and bad, but consequences nonetheless. Actions go hand in hand. There are things that cannot be separated, such as our actions and consequences. And it really bothers me with this, because are humans so self-righteous that we think that this isn't true? That we are never a part of the problem. See, remember the theological question. Why would a loving God let bad things happen? Is it really how far we've fallen that, well, God's just being mean? The polar ice caps are melting and global warming is a real thing. Well, God must just be angry with us because I had nothing to do with it. Are you out of your mind? The millions and millions and millions of gallons of toxic sludge and radioactive sludge that we're dumping into the oceans every year has nothing to do with it. No. The plastics companies that are pumping billions of gallons into pollution into the air, that China is so foggy you can't see more than a mile on a high production day, has nothing to do with the ice caps, man. God's just angry. Why is God being mean? Come on. Have we really fallen that far where we can't even say, where I can't say, I drive my car and it pollutes the earth? I'm part of the problem. No. Why would we ever put the blame where it belongs, which is on us? See, the problem I have with this theological question is you lost the most important part of this problem. Why do bad things happen? Because of people. You are evil. Get used to it. Own it. Start understanding it. Then we can start to fix the problem. Until we realize that humans are a problem, nothing will ever change. Nothing will ever get better. We'll just keep blaming God. It just breaks my heart that we can't own up to the fact that we're not perfect, that we make mistakes. Because guess who bears the bill when it comes due, bears the consequences? It's the next generation. You are suffering at the hands of your parents and your grandparents and their parents. We have a generation of women who are too scared to know and be women. We have a generation of men who don't even know what that word means and how to become men. How did we get here? We got here by the theology and the overcorrection of the men and women who came before us. Generational issues is a real thing, and it's biblical. If we don't understand it, we're doomed to repeat it. I don't believe that, Pastor Scott. Nothing is like that. Oh, really? Then ask me why when I was 17 years old I was put on heart medication for cholesterol. I was 17. I was in the prime of my physical existence. I was a fit kid, yet I got a bad heart. Why? My father has the same issue. My grandfather has the same issue. His father had the same issue. My mother has the same issue. Her dad had the same issue. It's been passed down through the generations. Track back every Drumheller. They all have heart problems. All of my family members that I know of died of heart attacks. It's a generational issue. My dad has dyslexia. His dad has dyslexia. Passed down through the generations. And to act like we don't have problems that exist today that aren't passed down is ridiculous. They are. Your political views most likely come from your parents. And that's okay. I'm just saying you have to recognize these things and think for yourself, to decide for yourself. A lot of you, your belief in Jesus comes from your parents. That's a good one. That's great. But you have to think, you have to believe for yourself. Otherwise, you're just accepting generations. And I got news for you. Because your dad's a pastor, doesn't mean you're getting into heaven. Heaven don't work like that. God doesn't work like that. There is no generational acceptance. Aunt Booby can pray for you to be in heaven as much as she wants. Ain't going to get you in. You have to make the decision. Remember, your actions carry consequences. You have to believe. Otherwise, you will reap the consequences of rejecting Jesus. We need to recognize that humans cannot separate actions and consequences. For every action, there is a consequence. And I say humans because we need to understand that God operates outside of the laws, restrictions, and rules of mankind. Now, that sounds a lot like a theological question. Well, it is. And it raises the question, why doesn't he have to do things the way we do? Let me explain. By asking you a theological question, where did God come from? That's a good one. You ever been asked that? Answer that one. Okay, I will. This question displays, first off, remember, you look at the question first. This question displays that you don't understand the God of the Bible. My God, the only one true living God. Because if God was created, then was he really God? See, if God operates the way I do, then is he really God? See, this is the fun part about theological questions. It's such a good question. See, most of the questions raise more questions. Most of your answers will raise more questions. And that's okay. Keep tracking them down. Keep answering them. God is not limited to what is called a continuum. Continuum is these three things you see up there. Time, space, and matter. What a continuum is these three things cannot exist apart. They have to come into existence together simultaneously at the same time. Let me explain. If there was matter but no space, if God created this pen but no space, where would he put it? If God created matter and space, when would he put it? See, it's a continuum. You can't have one without the others, also known as a trinity. See, God's so good that he puts his fingerprints on everything. You can't have one of these come into existence without the other. So then that begs the question about creation. Well, the Bible answers that in Genesis 1:1 in 10 words. The very first 10 words of your Bible says, in the beginning, there's time. God created the heavens, there's space, and the earth, there's matter. See, it's a trinity of trinities. It's so good. It's so good. Because it says that, and what I mean by a trinity of trinities is time has present, past, and future. Space has height, width, and length. And matter has solid, liquid, and gas. Each one is a trinity. And the existence of God, Genesis 1:1, is a trinity of trinities. It explains it all, how we came to be. See, the thing that we mix up is that God has to operate within these. He does not. Let me explain. Each one of you, most of you, have a phone in your pocket. Now, the creator of that phone lives in that phone and changes the numbers and the pictures on the screen to your command, correct? No. You would say Steve Jobs created this iPhone that I have in my hand, but he created it. He operates outside of it, but he put rules, regulations, and things and restrictions on this to make my life more benefit, right? Why don't we understand this with God? God created the world and mankind. He put rules, restrictions, and regulations on you to operate, but he operates outside of it because he's God. He lived before it. He lived after it. He'll always be. He is in it, through it, above it, beyond it. He does not operate in it. See, the question, where did God come from, is us trying to force God to obey the laws of man. He's not God then. The only reason I worship him is because he is so beyond everything and anything I can imagine, think, or understand. He's beyond it because he created it. See, do you get how amazing that is when you understand that there are things you will not understand? It's okay. And some will say, well, that's a cop-out. I believe the opposite. I think it's more hard for someone, human, to come up with such an amazing and thought-provoking thing than it would be to say, oh yeah, we can explain God. It's more difficult if the Bible's a figment of our imaginations in some book cooked up by some crazy person to say that, to come up with this kind of thinking than it is to come up with an answer. The answer is God is way outside of our understanding. He operates far beyond anything we can understand and comprehend. But the good news is he has given us free will and a brain to come to a reasoning and understanding that if he is beyond, if he is that powerful, if he is who he says he is, which I believe that he is, then I can follow him with all my heart. That I can understand, God, when you tell me to sacrifice my son and it makes absolutely no sense, but I understand you operate outside of my understanding, that I can trust and believe in you, whether I get it or not, whether I understand or not. Now that's faith. You cannot have faith without understanding God is far beyond anything we can comprehend, understand, and believe. True faith is given to you by God. See, humans are limited, but not God. We have things that cannot be separated, like actions bring consequences, but God is above them, beyond them, and far past them. Now, oh geez, okay. I hope this helps you. And so I had a young student, and before I get into the story, I'm going to tell you my answer. She bothered me. I love her dearly, but this young lady got very angry at me because I gave her a real answer instead of an answer she wanted. And the question she kept yelling at me is, why would a loving God send someone to hell? Why does a loving God let bad things happen? She was so upset, screaming at me. And I'm going to share my answer with you. But before I do, as I'm sharing, I want you to be praying. Because after I answer this, I have slides to go with it to help you understand. I have music in the background that's going to lead us into a time of prayer. I'm going to open these altars, and I'm going to ask anyone who struggles with this question, who struggles with understanding the heart of God. Many of you are going off to college. Many of you are thinking about jobs. Many of you thinking about cars. If you are struggling hearing God's voice, if you're struggling understanding where he's pointing you, if you struggle at all with anything, this is where you find it. I am a firm believer that at the altar is where you meet God. It's biblical, time and time again. God operates outside of our understanding. He can meet you anywhere. I'm not saying he can't, but I'm saying I know this is a place. I was sitting right here before you guys got here, crying out to him in prayer, begging him to forgive me for the sins that I have committed, the struggles that I'm having, to give me revelation, and he met me here. The Bible says when you seek, you will find. When you knock, the door will be answered. So if you sit in the seat and don't knock, nobody's going to answer. I want you, when you hear this, when I open these altars, I want you to come forward and let our leaders pray over you. Pray for each other. I will pray for you. And I want you to seek answers from God. That's what this whole thing is about. It's not just trying to understand things better. It's trying to have experiences with God. The most significant experiences I have with him is when I take time to dwell on his word, to try and understand him better. That's when I feel him. Because I'm in his will. I'm in his presence. I'm chasing after him. That's when you understand. So please, do not hesitate. Don't wait for somebody to do it first. Be the first one out of the seat. Run after God's heart. Because I'm telling you now, I believe it in all my bones. God has something he wants to share with you tonight. The Holy Spirit has people in here he wants to give revelation. He wants to give understanding to. So be one of them. But if you sit in the chair, your actions have consequences. Don't sit in the chair and wonder why I wasn't touched by God. You weren't obedient. This young woman, why does God send people to hell? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why is God being mean to us? And she was yelling, and I said, fine, you want to talk about it? Let's talk about it. It says in Genesis 3, the fall of man, it describes Adam and Eve were in the garden, and everybody knows this is when they sinned. They ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God said they became like one of us. They knew right from wrong. And so God kicked them out. And she interrupts me. She said, Scott, see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. How does a loving God let bad things happen? That's not love. That's not good. It's mean. And I said, oh, ye who have little faith, you don't know the desires of your Father's heart. God didn't kick them out to condemn them. He didn't kick them out because he was so upset with them and just couldn't stand the sight of them. God sent Adam and Eve out because he loved them. You say to me, no. Because there was another tree in that garden, there was a tree of life, that if they would have ate from it, they would have lived forever. You're right. There was a tree of life in that garden. But see, God operates outside our understanding, because God knew that if they ate from that tree, they would have made a bad thing permanent. See, when they ate from the first tree, when they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil first, it broke them. It fractured their relationship with God. It no longer existed. Your consequence to your action was now death. So God, with as much love and mercy in his heart, said, before you make it permanent, get out. Because this isn't the life I want for you. When they left the garden, God smiled. You know why? Because he had a better way. Even in that moment, before the existence, before Genesis 1:1, he created a lamb. A lamb who was going to take on the form of a man called Jesus, who he had prepared to come and restore you. See, you say to me, young lady, that God was being mean in the garden. I beg to differ. God, with all his love, sent you out of that garden because he knew there was a man who was going to come, who was going to teach you, who was going to love you, who was going to show you a better way, who was going to make you right with God the Father. And then that he will make permanent, because he didn't create hell for you. He wants nothing more than you to be with him in heaven above, in paradise for all eternity. But he knew, because of your disobedience, he had to get you out before you made a bad thing permanent, before you did something that he couldn't undo, before you cemented in your hearts and in your minds. You say, why does God do bad things to bad people or good people? And I argue, the answer is he doesn't. The Bible says that God is love. Everything he does is to better your life. But Scott, he kicked him out. I didn't say it wasn't painful. I didn't say they were happy about it. But it was for your own good. With that understanding, you would say, good parents don't discipline your children. The Bible says otherwise. It says, those who love their son, love their daughter, will not spare the rod. You discipline those that you like. It's not fun. It's not joyful. It's not a good feeling. But it's necessary for them to grow. It's beneficial for their lives. See, God in his love and mercy has given you heartache, has allowed hardship into your lives. Be thankful for it. Look at it with a different perspective. If only Adam and Eve could look at the garden and say, God, thank you for getting us out before we made mistakes that even you couldn't undo. See, he operates outside our understanding.